Well, no, they've ridden the ride by now, I think.
It's a little chilly out here tonight.
It's getting there.
Yeah, it feels good. Having a great night here at Disneyland? Who's been on the Indiana Jones adventure this evening?
Good.
What have the rest of you been doing? Cinderella. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Cinderella?
We didn't get invited.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what the other part does.
Oh, man. Yes, indeed. Well, I'm sitting here, speaking of movies, I'm sitting here with one of the great movie fans in the entire world, Mr. Tony Baxter, and that is true. I mean, you have amassed quite the collection.
Oh, yeah, it's a disease. I don't know.
Okay,
I haven't migrated over to digital yet, but I have a few of them by the rest. But I have plenty of the Blu-rays and DVDs and even some old laser discs. So
I'm gonna embarrass you. Where were you today?
I was at Amoeba this morning. You know, there was something new in 3D that I couldn't live my life without. So. Yeah.
So I say movie fan because one of your favorite movies is?
Yeah, way back, even almost 10 years before the opening of the ride, a friend of mine, Skip Lang, who you saw in the film, we snuck out of Imagineering one afternoon. We saw that they were screening a preview of George's new project called The Raiders of the Lost Ark. We thought it was something about Noah's Ark being found. You know? And I remember we had to sit through Excalibur, and that's not a bad movie, but if you've seen it once and you know you're going to see a Lucas Spielberg production after that's over, there was popcorn being thrown through the theaters, and it was really a riot waiting for that to start. After the movie was over, after we saw Indiana Jones, the first one, it was kind of like our lives had changed. And I remember Skip and I said, imagine if that was a Disney property, and imagine if we could think up a ride vehicle. Uh-oh.
There's a big ball coming at us.
That's the wrong land. It's actually our offices behind the Indy building sound just like that every 18 seconds.
That is true.
So I didn't even think there was anything. You had to bring it to my attention. Anyway, where was I?
I have no idea. There was a big ball coming at us.
Anyway, so we're sitting there saying, imagine if Disney had this property, and imagine if there were a ride vehicle that could do the energy and kinetics of that movie. Which there wasn't. Everything was pretty passive that way at that time, or else it was a roller coaster, and you couldn't really do any show with it. So we kind of put it out of our minds, and we said, no, that's never going to happen. And lo and behold, it did, and
it did,
the rest is history. Yeah.
Yes, and India's found a home in more ways than one.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as we go on.
Yeah.
Actually.
Now, when you say the name Indiana Jones, that conjures up some pretty well-established icons and thematics. But when you were, tinkering with the idea of Indiana Jones, you reached beyond the boundaries of Walt Disney Imagineering, didn't you?
In what way do you mean by that?
Well, you kind of surveyed other people other than Imagineers. Well, I'll just show you. So.
Oh yeah, okay. It's you folks.
It's these folks right here.
Yeah, I was thinking Drew Struzan, all of these people that are so. But before we commit to something, we want to make sure we're on the right track to find out whether or not something like this, would go over well here. So, what we do, and it isn't really the design of the attraction, but we want to find out what it is that our audience would expect to find in something like this. So, what you're going to see is an average day at Disneyland. We came down here with cameras. And we asked all the guests, what would you expect if we were to build an Indiana Jones ride? What do you think we might find in it? And here are some of those answers.
Yes. Now, pay very close attention to what you're about to see. And pay very close attention to some of these answers. Some of them are what you'd expect. Some of them are from left field. And some of them are just downright strange. So, take a look. Take a look.
It's late.
Take another look. There we go.
If you were to build an Indiana Jones ride, what would you expect that ride?
Oh, through caves, down a slide, horrible things happening.
I'd have to have that thing with the big rock rolling down the little chute.
Snake fish. I want that big ball, that big rock.
You know that scene in the first Indiana Jones where that big huge ball?
They have snakes, bugs.
Going through where he has the big ball rolling after him.
I like that big ball that comes after.
Like snakes and
That's Rob's things that roll at you and just really wild.
Like the pretending things like you're gonna go to fire, but when you really go in and spawn things like something.
we'll have to have the snake pit. Right.
Enslaved children.
Anything else?
No, that would be enough.
That would be enough for us, yeah.
Now, for how many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you would have said the big ball? Okay.
Okay, so
How
we got
many
that
of
one
you?
right.
How many of you would have said enslaved children? Okay, now keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Security, they're out here. Don't want to talk to you people.
Okay, so we took all that into consideration. And early on in projects, they don't really give you a budget. They just say, do something wonderful. And so this rendering by Brian Jowers kind of shows you something wonderful. And we can kind of play, where's Waldo with
Yeah,
this
it shows
one?
you a lot of wonderful.
Yeah, a
actually.
lot of wonderful. Okay, here is the troop transport. It's not a Jeep, even though you're gonna.
You're not supposed
I'm
to
not
say
supposed
the
to say
J
that
word.
We don't have a sponsorship here.
Okay.
Okay, so that one you know. All right, did you also see over here the Jungle Cruise going through the middle of the ride? Wouldn't that have been cool? And up here, come on train. Last time we got a train right at this point. Here is the Park Railroad running right through the middle of the building. Imagine that. And then finally, and this ride you can go on, you just have to go about 5,000 miles to do it, and that is the minecart ride through Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom down there in the bottom. So we really had fun with this one. This was like Brian's first pass, and everybody loved it, and they said, keep going with it. And
Here comes that ball
here's
again.
That ball again. Okay.
Okay. Enough of the
And-
ball.
Yeah. All right, so keep going with it. So the next step was to kind of begin to flesh it out. Now, we were doing a very small project at the same time over in Paris, called Disneyland
Called
Paris.
Disneyland
Have any
Paris,
of you
yeah.
been there? Okay. And so the majority of our team that would eventually do Indiana Jones was over there, but this wonderful man, Herbie Ryman, who you all know, who had created the first images for Disneyland and had been involved in everything. These are actually some of the last pieces of art that he did for Imagineering. And he didn't really have a guide as to what it was going to be. We just said, Herbie, we trust you. Just go and do some images of Indiana Jones, and we'll all start to, you'll get us all inspired when we come back from Paris and put our hearts into
And
it.
it is kind of remarkable how close his
Yeah.
rendering is
Yeah.
to kind of what
It ended
eventually
up.
happened. Yeah.
I think he understood that a 4-person minecart would give us about the capacity of Snow White Ride and Fantasyland, so we had to really figure out a way to beef it up, and he's got 8 in there, so he was on the right track. We ended up with 12, but that's kind of the beginning of it.
So Brian comes up with this kind of kitchen sink approach.
Yeah.
Everything's in it.
Yeah.
Herbie kind of refines the look and feel of it a little bit, but it's still kind of a dog's breakfast of Indiana Jones. It's a little bit of everything.
Well, why not? We were told, make it really cool. So here you see the Fountain of Youth. We talk about it in the Hall of Promise in the current ride, but you actually went there in this first one. And this is kind of fun. Brian loves to sneak things into his rendering. So like another Where's Waldo? If you look up here, you can see Indy with his torch having discovered the Fountain of Youth. I didn't see that until we projected this thing up the other night. I said, oh my gosh, Alex Williams, who put this show together, did a fantastic job. Called that to my attention. I don't think I had even noticed it. So.
I'd never noticed knew about the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, well, that's one of the 3 wishes. We'll get into that later.
Okay.
Yep.
Now this next image, talk to us about this.
Yeah, this really kind of gives you a view of Indiana Jones that I'm glad we didn't go this route. It was more like a book report where you go through and you see scenes of Indy doing his thing rather than you getting to participate. And I've always liked the Peter Pan ride has been a milestone for me because from the moment you sail out of the bedroom at the beginning where you hear Peter say, come on, everybody, here we go. It's all about what you do and how you affect the things around you. And I think that's much more repeatable. If you're just checking off the beats from a movie or a story where there's so-and-so doing that and doing that, it becomes more pedestrian. So I think when we got this rendering done, that again, Brian did this one, and you can see Thuggies mixed in with the original film in South America. So I don't know how that cultural thing went on, but anyway, you know, you were watching Indy trigger what would eventually become Mara, but in this point, it was really taking its cue from that first film, the prologue in the first film, where we saw Indy remove that idol, and then everything went into chaos at that point. We knew we wanted to trigger something, but I think it was much stronger. We created a way where it's what you guys do that causes the calamity, rather than what a figure out.
So it's all their fault.
It's all your fault.
There you go. We were talking earlier about the fact that when you go up to the temple, you feel like, especially if you're familiar with the four films, it does really feel like the second film, but it's not primarily based on the second film.
Actually, more of the things are based on the first film, including the finale, the rolling ball and the snakes and the bugs and all that stuff. All the bugs are from the second film, but I'd say it's pretty well matched in there. So we tried to, you know, the only thing I can say for sure is there's nothing from the fourth film.
The woman with the crystal skull is the one clapping down here in the front.
She has to leave the auditorium. I didn't say anything.
Let's go to the next image here and talk to us about this this model.
Yeah, we were still on the anything is possible mode at Disneyland. You heard Walt say that, and we were firm believers in it. So here you can see the blue water down there represents the two passages of water are configuring to the elephant bathing pool. So coming into the bathing pool, you can see that would be right about in here. So you go in, then you went into the experience, and then came back out after finishing the bathing pool and went on down to where the traps or lost whatever it is, the camp, the trashing the camp scene
with the gorillas.
Yeah, with the gorillas. So that's how it fit in. And then the other rides were reached within. Now this is sort of interesting. I think this was the point at which the financial people got very interested in the project. They're going, what are those guys doing? You know, that's the biggest thing we've ever done. And it still is, you know, but at this point, this was like a half-inch scale model, and it filled half the model shop. You know, it was gigantic. And you could see the tracks in there. If you look really carefully, you can see the troop transports and the roller coaster and the train going through the middle of the building and the jungle cruise going in there. And so something had to be done, and we had to get practical from this point on.
You had to get serious.
Yeah, we had to get serious.
And serious looks like this.
Yeah. So Chuck Ballou, the artist that you see there, he had a great style. It was very comic book-like. And Raiders and the indie films all kind of have a comic book superhero kind of 30s look to it. So Chuck was really right to come in at this time because he was very prolific and he could do these quickly. And this pretty much stayed as the rallying shot for the exterior. It was doable. And the interesting thing is, this is the largest building for any ride in Disneyland, and it's in the smallest land. And they would have been much happier if we put it over in Tomorrowland, where they really needed something important and big at that time. And I said, you can't have Indiana Jones in Tomorrowland. I said we could do young Indiana Jones, and we actually did a concept for this area we're in right now, where the Dun and Duffy Circus was parked out here, and you went under the berm, and we had kind of a version of the stunt show with young Indy involved in that. But I'm very particular about the theming in the story. It has to fit exactly the land. Some people aren't so stubborn about that, but it was one of my assets and faults, I guess. Yeah. So I was stubborn. I said it has to fit in there, and they go, well, you figure out a way to make it fit. So we took away the old pirate queue line that was on that side of the pirate building, and that's pretty much how you get the 1/8 of a mile from the treehouse back to where you board the ride.
But you know, we were talking in the previous show that Disneyland's size almost demands that you're more imaginative in the use of space.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say?
I'd say not only that, but I think there's an asset about Disneyland. It's the most charming Disney park of them all because it was, yes.
Oh, come on.
And part of that is because it was done at a time when they didn't know how to build a park for massive crowds. And when you look at a space like this, it accommodates more people, but it's not as fun and wonderful to be in as the charming things you find like over at Fantasy Fair, and it was Carnation Gardens before that, my alma mater when I was scooping ice cream. All of those were very comfortable spaces, and you only find that at Disneyland. We tried really hard to put some of it in Disneyland Paris by trickery. We got some of the spaces back down. Our hub over there is tiny and so forth, but those are the things you find about Disneyland. So I think Indiana Jones really reinforces that, especially out in front. One of my favorite things was a woman who, when we opened it, she said, it's just like all they did was cleared a little bit of the foliage, and we were able to go into this area that's always been hidden in the jungle. And I said, that's what we want.
There you go. Well, Indiana Jones also has some of the greatest concept art. It kind of harkens back to the concept art that used to be done for like Pirates or Haunted Mansion. So take us through some of this really fun concept art.
Again, Chuck Ballou. We needed to figure out a gimmick, if you will, that allowed us to make it worth your while to stand in line for 2 hours, all right? So I'm sitting there saying, what on earth, why would I wait 2 hours in line to see something? And I thought, well, let's give a gift that would be worthy of a wait like that.
Churros.
So, churros, yeah, that was one of the things.
Fast passes.
Fast passes, definitely. But we settled on eternal youth or future knowledge or wealth beyond imagination. I think I'd wait for all three of those. I have my favorites, of course. I think at this point I'd want youth again. Anyway, so we figured, okay, that would be worth the wait. But now we have to find a way that nobody will get any of those things, or Disney would be out of business pretty quick. So we had the 3 doors that gave you the 3 elements, and a very tricky way of convincing people that it was going in different directions. And this was just at the dawn of the internet. And I loved reading all the comments about people writing and saying, we've been to the future and we've seen wealth, but we've never gotten to go to youth. I don't think that it really goes that way. And then someone would write back saying, no, I've been to youth, but I've never been to... And it was great because people were coming back again and again, which was exactly, it was the dawn of, guest involvement, more interaction, and all these buzzwords were starting to creep up on us. And so you couldn't do something that was all programmed and no changeability in it. So this was a way of introducing an unpredictable element. It isn't truly interactive. You can only really do that on something like Midway Mania, where it's one person involved in shooting or something. But when you get into a group activity, everybody's saying they cheated. There's no way that it was an actual random event. So we settled for just making it random. So this is an example of the many things that happen to you when someone in the 12, always, and I guarantee this, we have never sent not cheap, a troop transport through the ride without someone in that group looking. And isn't it nice that you can't see the other people's eyes when you're going up that hall? So even if you did all 12 have your eyes closed, you can't prove it. There's no way you can see all 12.
So how many of you have looked into the eyes of Mara?
A few.
Okay,
all right.
Just a few.
And the neat thing is we've never had to give away endless wealth or any of those
or
other
youth
things.
or anything like that.
Never had to do it. So
I love this rendering. If you notice, Indiana Jones is swirled up in a snake in this.
It's a hidden Indy right over there. Yeah. All right, so now
Talk to us about this.
Yeah, this is kind of I'm taking out of the storyline for a minute to talk about. You'd think first off, why didn't they use the little mine car?
Right.
For people, you'd get the capacity of Snow White's adventures, and Disney isn't going to put that kind of effort into something for a limited capacity. So we had to think big, and the troop transport, and what we call the enhanced motion vehicle system was developed. It couldn't have happened if it wasn't due to Star Tours, because Star Tours proved that we could effectively give you emotional cues while you're on a ride through not lighting or music or any of the traditional theater tricks, but by using the motion itself, we could amplify something that happened. So if you're frightened by a snake, the vehicle can actually react physically to that and intensify the moment. Or going around a curve at only 15 miles an hour, it wouldn't feel like anything if we banked you correctly, but we bank you incorrectly, and it suddenly feels like you're going too fast in the same space. So these are drawings. This is the first one. You're going to see a few given to the engineers to say, do you think you could do this? Could you make it feel like even though it's glass smooth, just like this, could you make it feel like we were going down the stairs? And for the most part, they came through. This is George McGinnis, who's done many of the vehicles you've ridden here at Disneyland. Between he and Bob Gurr, the two of them are pretty much everything that you've ever ridden on.
Yeah.
And George is most recently, after he retired, he did over at Americana in Glendale, the trolleys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So here he is designing the mechanics and the aesthetics for the troop transport.
Yeah, don't call it a Jeep.
I'm trying to avoid that. We were really bad in the last one. I don't care. I mean, if you want to, I have one. You know, if you see
Tony drives a troop transport.
Yeah.
What he drives, that's his.
If you see one with a license plate Figment, then you know it's me.
That's right. And if it's shaking all over the place,
then
you really know it's
me,
him.
Yeah. I had special shock absorbers in there. So I can
and it lunges at snakes. It's a really weird car.
Yeah. Actually, riding my Jeep through a car wash is how we figured out how to do the rolling ball.
Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely. You know how you when you ride through in those things, you put it in park, and then you sit there and the room moves around you. And the first thing you think is, I mustn't have gotten in park because I'm still running forward. But you're not. It's the room, and your brain is programmed to say, cars move, rooms don't. You can't stop your brain from doing that. So I said, there's a home run effect. And it was Yale Gracie who did the amazing things in the Haunted Mansion, always said, the simplest ideas are the best. And so you're riding through a car wash at the end of the
So let me get this straight. Cars move, rooms don't.
Right.
Okay. So I bet you about 5 people in this audience tonight will go home sitting in their garage going, cars move, rooms don't.
No, go into a car wash, put it in park, and the first thing you'll think about is, I didn't get it in park, then I'm moving forward, backward. So.
Car washes in Southern California tomorrow are going to have a booming business because of this conversation.
We didn't have enough time to put it in the show, but I have footage that I recorded in there, and it's pretty effective. Yeah.
Of course you do. Of course you do. All right, let's move on. Tell us about this.
Okay, that's Topper Helmer, and he was one of our illustrators that did all of these sketches, and you can see a couple of his pieces there. And we'd throw them at the engineers, and like the guy over there going, oh, there's no way this is going to work. Or yes, maybe we can do that. So show a few more here.
Yeah.
You know, we came up with the idea of, could we have the thing teeter on the edge of the cliff? And they said, yeah, I think we can probably do that. How about when we're going across the bridge, could it feel like the wooden boards broke and the back end of it kind of cracked through, and then we have to kind of
leap
forward?
forward.
They said, yeah, we think we can do that. Then we came up with that other idea of like, can we have rocks, you know, fall down on the Jeep? And well,
no,
we didn't
you can't.
Yeah, no, you can't. Now, it's interesting, you know, they weren't concerned about you guys getting hurt there. They just were worried that we might harm or dent the Jeep. So there we go. I have to pay 25 cents. So the troop transport.
That's right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, speaking of the troop transport, we have some really cool footage, test footage, of when they tried out the vehicle.
Okay.
And you guys kind of had a funny nickname for the vehicle.
We did, because see, when you don't know if something's going to work, they give you seed money that won't go against the project if it doesn't go forward, if you can't make it work. So you don't want it associated with Lucasfilm in any way. So that, you know, we don't want to get them involved. So at this point in time, we said, until we can figure out whether we can make a vehicle that performs like a simulator in Star Tours, but goes through a ride like Pirates of the Caribbean, we're not going to tip our hands. So we came up with a name that was absolutely immune from being anybody else's product, and would be, if it didn't go anywhere, no one would be the wiser.
And what'd you call it?
The Thor vehicle.
And you can go meet Thor over in Tomorrowland.
Who knows?
Who knew? Who knew back then? This is great footage. Explain, before they look at this, explain the white line in the...
Now there's the train. It was supposed to come when we showed the slide of
running
that
behind schedule. Explain the white line in this video.
Yeah. You'll see a white line painted on the floor. We didn't have... The track that you see in the right, say, oh, it's on a track. It's not on a track. What that is a slot where all the computer information comes up through the floor into the vehicle. And the 4 wheels are independent. And it's actually steering. It can literally brake itself by having the 2 wheels turn in on each other and we just grind to a halt immediately, or we can slide by going all four wheels, slide off to the left or off to the right. But in this, you're seeing, we just were running in the garage over at Tahunga, and we painted a white line and got one of those little fake little robot things that follows a painted line on the ground. So your life, if you rode this, depended on a white line painted on the ground. So.
Let's take a look.
The little cart behind it is the computer, because that was just an off-the-shelf simulator mounted on a flatbed truck. And then all the smarts were traveling behind it. That's just cardboard mocked up to look like sort of a Jeep. We blindfolded people that rode it and then played a solid dialogue to see if they really thought they were doing what it was doing. And this is really what sold the project. When people wrote this, they said, let's invest in this. This is really a home run. There you have it.
That's pretty cool.
The Thor vehicle.
The Thor vehicle.
Kevin Feige would really like to know that.
Now, talk to us about the programming of the vehicle.
Yeah, okay, so 18 months were spent up at near Magic, well, that other park that's up in, there was a warehouse.
They park Jeeps up there by that park.
And so we built it there. I remember near the end, Michael Eisner came up and got a ride on the track up there. It was about half the length of the ride here. And he said, that is so good, I have a good mind to go over to that park and put flyers on their windshield saying, if you really want to go on a good ride, come a half a mile over here. And so once it got through that, and the engineers were pretty confident we could run it from 8 in the morning until midnight every day. Try that with any of your cars, by the way, and do all the things that we do to you on that for that amount of time. There's no way it would work. Anyway, so we were able to get it down here, and you see David Durham sitting in the back, right-hand side, third row. That is the fun seat, the most kinetic of the seats. That was where the programming was done. And Skip Lang, the art director, is giving him all kinds of trouble, saying, don't you think you could add just a little bit more in here and whatnot? So David told me that he wrote it over 2,000 times, beginning with just laying in a roadbed noise. So, you know, what you experience without any action that's dramatic is just kind of like you're rumbling along on a uneven surface, and all that is programmed into it because, again, the wheels are riding over something just as smooth as this floor up here.
You know, you just explained something. You know, Dave started working here back in the 80s.
Disneyland.
Yeah, at Disneyland. And I know Dave. And for the last 20 years, I've wondered why he cannot walk a straight line. And it's because of the 2,000 rides on the Indy attraction.
Yeah.
Really? Can you imagine 2,000 rides?
He's still thin from all the weight he lost from... Yeah.
All right, well, let's go through the attraction, and why don't you just comment on some of this imagery we have?
I will try.
There you go.
Okay, on the exterior, we're looking for something that was not one film specific, and again, it had to wedge in between the treehouse and the Jungle Cruise. So we settled on kind of the Delta region in India for our look out here. And we actually used what started out as a liability, an 1/8 of a mile distance between the loading and Adventureland. And again, like I said, this is the smallest land with the biggest ride in it. And so we took that 1/8 of a mile to actually, I think, move you deeper and deeper into the emotion of this story. So it actually went from a liability to a really great asset. I think the ride is twice what it could be by giving you all that. In fact, when the ride was almost nearly done, we had a couple of pass holder nights, I think, where we allowed guests to come out and they could walk through the queue up to the loading area, and then we had cast members telling them what would happen. And I remember the feedback we got from that was incredible, and it occurred to me that it was almost like what you would experience if you went to any real site in the world, where there wouldn't be a ride waiting at the end of the tour of the temple. You'd leave. You know, that would be the end of it. So at that point, without the ride, we were already up to some of the probably great archaeology sites in the world. And I think would hold its own against some of those things. Maybe I'm bragging a little bit, but the people that worked so hard on this, I think, worked as hard on this as the actual builders of these things back thousands of years ago.
I'm still kind of stuck on this. So you brought guests into the park,
Yep.
walked through that enormous queue line, got them to the loading area, and basically
they were
said,
thrilled.
psych!
You know how it is. Everybody wants to be. How many of you waited in line at midnight to get the next Harry Potter book? You know, it was you couldn't like
The
go.
lady
to,
with the crystal skull down here.
Yeah, you couldn't go to school or go to work the next day and not be able to converse about what was going on. So a lot of people just, you're not going to believe what we got to do last night. We got to go through the Indiana Jones thing. So it was really great we were all working so hard at that point. We shut down all the work for 2 nights and just kind of went in there and listened to all the comments. It was great. It was really neat.
Now, for ardent Disney fans, you'll recognize this next image. But there's a little debate on the authenticity of this. Talk to us about this.
Well, I never thought I'd be on the opposite end of a debate with Steven Spielberg, but he is convinced this is not the Jeep, but we found it in London in a prop shop, and all the accommodations on it are not for being a real vehicle other than it will drive, but it's all made out of wood and things that you'd only use in a movie. The missing, what do you call it, radiator cap that Indy broke off, the little, and don't steal these now that I've pointed them out, but they are little golf balls that are put on there. These are things that would only be done, and if you look carefully underneath, all the rigging under there is there for the stunt man who took the role of Indiana Jones going back under the cart. So it absolutely is, but that was one of the things where you go, here I am getting to meet one of my icon people, and I don't want to argue with him, but it is it is definitely. So
I'm on Tony's side on this one.
Yeah. And it became the rallying thing because, you know, if you ask those people again, what do you think you'd ride through in an Indy ride, they'd probably all say a mine cart. And like I explained to you, we needed it to be a high capacity thing because of the enormousness of it. So we had to find something that was logic in the Indy universe that was a bigger vehicle. So the troop transport let us get 12 people. There are no Jeeps that hold 12 people. No. Enhanced motion vehicle.
Let's talk a little bit now about the monolithics.
Yeah, okay. Chuck talked to you a little bit in the film that you saw about what he came up with here. We were looking for something to add more fun to the queue, and it was fun at the early onset. People were writing guest comments saying, I didn't have enough time in the queue to read all the things, and I had to take photos so that I could decode it when I got home. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't have enough time in the queue, you know. And we were worried about them waiting and giving them these great gifts and all that, and now they were complaining there wasn't enough time. But you can see the header there, which is Beware of the Eyes of Mara in code, and then the mural over on that would be the left side for you, is the 3 wishes that you can obtain. And then over on the right is the Obelisk of Doom, which they made an incredibly cool model that I have at home of that depicts all the terrible things that will happen if you look into the eyes of Mara. And then you heard a little bit about the 2 drinking fountains. I would honestly ask you to avoid these fountains because I can't remember which one brings life and which one brings death. Yeah.
So for the half of the audience that we'll be seeing later, talk to us about the wall behind the obelisk, though. I've never noticed this before.
It's a kind of heartfelt tribute. Those are all of the initials of a lot of the people that worked on it. But the last one, just as you leave this room and go on down the corridor, is Frank Wells, who was head of the Disney Company, president at that time, and had just passed away. And he was very close to all of us. A great, great guy and a real adventurer. He'd climbed 7 mountains in his life, major mountains. And so we put that in there as a tribute to Frank.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Now, this next piece of footage that we have, I'd never seen this before, and I think this is really cool. And we have to explain, this came about during your Sunset Boulevard phase.
Oh, yeah. I got freaked out by Glenn Close was in this incredible play about Norma Desmond, this fading, Hollywood star and whatnot. So I'd been talking about it to our writer, Pam Fisher, about how great, you got to see this play. And so she went and saw it. She loved it too. And so she concocted the following scene, which was originally part of our Q film, but as it got more specific about what we had to add in for safety, they had to take out some of the fun things. So we're going to show you tonight one of the ones that used to be in there that I really love this one. It was my favorite.
Also, near the end of this clip, watch for Babe Ruth. He was he's a great soothsayer and prognosticator,
yes,
allegedly. So take a watch.
Louder.
Louder.
Silent Film Store Nora West, one of the temple's recent visitors. She chose the Fountain of Eternal Youth. No more matronly roles for Nora. Move over Jean Harlow. This jubilant junior visited the Chamber of Earthly Riches. Looks like his allowance has gone up. Say, buddy, could you spare a dime? How about 1,000,000 of them?
Why, even Babe Ruth himself visited the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. He entered the Observatory of the Future. Now he predicts that baseball players will someday be paid millions of dollars a year. Perhaps even the vision of the gods is a bit blurred. Will it happen?
Let's hear it from Babe Ruth, huh?
And that was Pam Fisher doing that narration at the beginning. Yeah, this was our demo track that you heard.
So now, you did make it impossible for anybody not to look into the eyes of Mara.
The company said, this is great, but we can't afford to give even one of those gifts away. So I said, we've got this way, and I told you earlier, of creating this unavoidable confrontation with Mara. So this is that shot. And what we're going to do now, I think, is go into another clip.
The animatic.
The animatic. This is a combination of an inch scale model, which means you'd be about 6 inches high if you were walking through this model. And we put a snorkel camera down in there, which before they had CG, this was, we had to like put a real camera in a real model. If we couldn't get the camera in there, we would resort to photos of the artwork.
Yeah.
So what you're going to see is a combination of those with an amazing salesman, Eddie Sato, who I used to joke, I said, if that snake in our ride could buy shoes, you'd be able to sell them to him, you know. He was really good. So we'd always get Eddie involved. He was involved in the early construction or concepts of the ride. But he does this narration. I think you'll get a kick out of how he's selling in every way possible. Because this was the piece that actually went out to management and got the final buy-in on the project.
Yeah, he's very, very smooth. And again, it's really remarkable when you see this. It's a model only this big.
Yeah.
Kind of takes your breath away. Let's take a watch.
In the load area, we are greeted by the ride operator. I think you might recognize him. And load into Jeeps on both sides of the platform.
Jeeps.
As you recall, the Jeep seats 12 passengers. Once loaded, guests head for the Chamber of Destiny, where they will embark on one of 3 paths. Icons above each door clearly show that the Jeep ahead went through a different door, either the path to future knowledge to your left, or the road to youth to your right. Here we go through the center door depicting wealth. The idol at the end of the Hall of Promise will again be lit according to the door you pass through. The eyes explode in a fit of anger as someone has looked. Control of your vehicle is seized by the angry spirit and plunged into the Tunnel of Torment, which features a lightning decay special effect. This is the transition point. The entire feeling, character of the ride changes from a Jeep tour to a wild adventure. We also transition from white to black light. At the gates of eternal doom, we see Indiana Jones for the first time, keeping the gates closed, allowing us to escape. This rendering depicts the kinetic feeling of the big chaos room. Here guests will see other vehicles, encounter dramatic special effects, fire, steam explosions, falling debris, and a death ray from a huge skull as they try to escape. The scale of the room, 50 feet deep, 140 feet long, and 100 feet wide, will add to the sense of peril. The first high-speed portion of the ride will be through a rockwork grotto filled with mummies and a huge wind effect. After squishing through a room filled with bugs using a headlight projection effect, guests will get their chance to cross the perilous suspension bridge. The bridge ropes will sway and accentuate the motion of the Jeep itself. Leaving the treacherous bridge behind us, sinister gargoyles seem to loom above. We ask ourselves, snakes, why did it have to be snakes? Suddenly, a huge animated cobra strikes out at us, the invaders of his lair. Sliding wildly down an eroding bank, we enter the candlelit interior of the giant skull. Racing past the lava pit, we enter the dark rat cave where we will use the motion base and steering of the Jeep to its fullest extent prior to bursting through a projection of rats jumping into the vehicle. We blow through a crossfire of poison darts into a narrow cavern. Here we see Indiana Jones dangling overhead. Suddenly, the giant ball is revealed, rolling toward us. To avoid it, we reverse, and then dive beneath the rolling ball through a collapsing floor. Amidst a haze of dust and rubble, we survive, only to see a tattered but triumphant Indiana Jones exclaim, "Tourists, why did it have to be tourists?" We laugh and hear the strains of the Indiana Jones theme as we move into the unload area.
I'd buy it.
Someone did, fortunately.
Now, this attraction has one of the great finales
Yeah.
of all the Disney theme park attractions. Talk to us about this equation that you use when you create such an elaborate, immersive attraction like this. There's a simple equation you use.
Yeah, it's sort of something that came out of John Hinch's, he was a very philosophical man, and he had all these things about what's programmed into the DNA of human
It's kind
beings.
of primitive.
Very primitive, things that we aspire to that we really shouldn't aspire to, but we do. So playing off of that, Eddie and I came up with a formula that I'm going to share with you right now, but I probably shouldn't, but that is that fear minus death equals thrill. That's why you're all here, right? Everyone wants to get really close to that middle word without really experiencing it, and you trust Disney that we're going to get you safely nearby that one, and then that works out to being kind of thrilling, and that's what the game is all about.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, now, we have a piece of footage. You guys remember a show that was on the Disney Channel years ago called Disneyland Inside Out? It was a show that took you behind the scenes of Disneyland and Walt Disney World. And in this episode that we're going to show you, this little snippet, you're on the attraction with a fellow by the name of J.D. Roth, who is the host. And why don't you set this up?
Well, J.D. was particularly sensitive to motion sickness. And he had done a dry run. Well, it wasn't a dry run. It was actually something else.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
And he said to me, he says, we have to do this all in one take because I think all I could do this afternoon is one ride. So we have to get it all or you'll have to pick up some other way, another pun intended.
Yes.
So anyway, what you're going to see is me looking like, is he going to make it all the way through the ride? And JD wondering whether he's going to make it all the way through the ride. So let's...
Yeah, so JD is putting his best face forward.
Yes.
He's smiling through his teeth. He's just getting through it. Watch Tony's reactions a few times. Even though you're having fun, you look a little concerned, particularly in one scene.
Well, especially like when you're about to go on something and you're thinking, well, this is going to be fun, and it's going to be neat and all that, and then the person says, oh, by the way, here's my problem. So
well, let's watch Tony and his problem.
When last we saw JD, he and Disney Imagineer Tony Baxter were on a runaway troop transport through the Indiana Jones adventure. One of the most amazing things about this ride is you never take the same trip twice. Computers actually decide your fate, changing the effects you experience every time.
Okay, so there's fire up here.
That's right. And it all has to happen every 18 seconds. Kidding, there's someone else right behind us. All these things have to happen in a movie. It's only once.
And we're moving pretty
From 8
fast.
in the morning till midnight, every 18 seconds, no matter what you're doing, something in here is happening.
It is an incredible ride. Now this bridge right here, how does the effect work when we fall?
That's a different program. We have about 160,000 variations of different movements that you can experience on the ride.
So every time you go on the ride, it's going to be different.
That's right, because the computer on board this vehicle can pick any one of those.
Like that, right
like
there.
That,
It's different.
yes. Now we're going right in the very heart of Laura.
There we are.
There you go.
Right.
Well, Tony, talk to us about, how do you get from that germ of an idea and renderings like this to reality?
Well, it's really easy at this stage with a great artist like Brian to paint something that you can't do. And I think I'm always trying to be conscious of that because I was the ultimate Disneyland fan growing up as a kid, and Disney never misrepresented anything. It was always exactly as Walt would show it on TV, and when you came out here to ride it, it delivered. So once we did something like this final that Brian did for what we could afford to build, I said, all right, it's up to all of us to deliver on the promise that Brian's rendering promoted here, and so here you're looking at how that came out, and I think we came pretty darn close to delivering on that goal. So I feel really good about what we were able to do.
Yep. I think we do too. Well, we have to wrap it up because it's cold.
I can see your breath.
Yeah, I can't see it. It's cold, and I see hot chocolate in our immediate future.
I hope so.
But I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Hope you continue to have a fun time here at Disneyland. And I think I can speak on behalf of everybody in the audience, Tony. Thank you, and to all the Imagineers.
Thanks to Alex for putting this together.
All the Imagineers who made Indiana Jones Adventure possible. So we have a little piece of video footage that will cap off the evening, and we hope you enjoy it. Thanks, everybody.
Now dare to cross forbidden boundaries to the ultimate adventure. Come on! It's more than a ride. It's real. Now your fears have a name. The Indiana Jones Adventure, new at Disneyland.
Thank you to all of our valued annual